In the dusty archives of the British Museum, Dr. Sarah Chun made a discovery that would challenge everything historians believed about the 19th century. What began as routine research into Victorian literature became an investigation into humanity's most carefully guarded secret. The first clue emerged from Charles Dickens' personal correspondence, found tucked between the pages of a first-edition copy of Hard Times. In a letter dated 1854, Dickens wrote to his friend John Forster, "The great fires have ceased at last, though the ash still falls like snow upon London. We must speak of these things only in our stories, for the world is not ready to remember what it has chosen to forget." Chun initially dismissed this as creative metaphor until she discovered similar references scattered throughout the works of other prominent 19th century authors. Jules Verne's unpublished manuscripts contain detailed technical drawings of what appear to be atomic devices, accompanied by notes written in a cipher that took Chun months to decode. When finally translated, Verne's notes revealed the great powers possessed weapons that could split the very atoms themselves. The demonstration in 1847 changed everything. The pieces began forming a pattern that defied conventional history. In Herman Melville's private journals, discovered in a hidden compartment of his desk, he wrote extensively about the great light that rose over the Atlantic and cities that vanished in moments, leaving only shadows burned into stone. These entries, dated between 1845 and 1850, described events that bore an unsettling resemblance to nuclear warfare. Leo Tolstoy's unpublished works contain perhaps the most explicit references. In a manuscript fragment titled "The Fire from Heaven," he described weapons of such terrible power that nations agreed to bury all knowledge of them, lest humanity destroy itself utterly. The document went on to detail an international conspiracy to erase all evidence of these weapons and the war in which they were used. Chun's investigation led her to parliamentary records buried deep in government archives. A classified document from 1851, marked with seals from multiple European powers, outlined what was termed the Great Forgetting, a coordinated effort to remove all references to nuclear weapons from official records and replace them with alternative explanations for certain catastrophic events of the 1840s. The Crimean War, Chun discovered, was not the limited conflict described in textbooks, but rather a cover story for a much more devastating nuclear exchange between Russia and an alliance of Western powers. What historians attributed to disease and conventional warfare had actually been the result of primitive atomic weapons deployed across the Black Sea region. Evidence appeared in the most unexpected places. Alfred Lord Tennyson's In Memoriam contained coded references to atomic theory disguised as grief poetry. Emily Dickinson's seemingly abstract verses about bombs and suns and the split of lightning took on new meaning when viewed through this lens. Even children's literature bore traces of the suppressed knowledge. Lewis Carroll's nonsense poems contain mathematical formulas that, when properly interpreted, described nuclear fission. The conspiracy extended beyond literature into science and politics. Chun discovered that many prominent scientists of the era had their work systematically altered or destroyed. Michael Faraday's complete research notes revealed experiments with radioactive materials decades before Marie Curie's official discoveries. His observations about splitting the indivisible and the terrible energies contained within matter had been edited out of all published works. Government documents reveal the existence of memory committees established in every major European capital. These organizations were tasked with creating alternative historical narratives to replace memories of the nuclear war. They commissioned new histories, destroyed inconvenient evidence, and even arranged for the construction of false archaeological sites to support their revised timeline. The scale of the cover-up was staggering. Entire cities that had been destroyed were rebuilt in secret, with populations relocated and given new identities. The mysterious Irish potato famine was revealed to be a euphemism for nuclear contamination that rendered vast areas of Ireland uninhabitable. Mass migration patterns of the 1840s, traditionally attributed to economic factors, were actually refugee movements from irradiated zones. Religious institutions played a crucial role in the deception. Vatican archives contain papal bulls authorizing the suppression of ungodly knowledge and the creation of alternative explanations for divine intervention. Protestant churches across Europe received similar directives, creating a unified religious front that supported the official historical narrative. The technology described in these hidden documents was surprisingly advanced. Steam-powered centrifuges for uranium enrichment, chemical processes for plutonium extraction, and delivery systems based on modified artillery pieces painted a picture of a Victorian nuclear program far more sophisticated than previously imagined. The weapons themselves were described as crude, but devastatingly effective, capable of leveling entire districts of major cities. Chun found evidence that the nuclear war had been triggered by a dispute over colonial territories, with each major power seeking to demonstrate its ultimate capability. The first atomic device was reportedly detonated over an uninhabited island in the North Atlantic as a demonstration. When negotiations failed, the weapons were used in anger, leading to exchanges that left parts of Eastern Europe uninhabitable for decades. The aftermath was equally remarkable. Radiation sickness was reclassified as various epidemic diseases, with medical professionals sworn to secrecy about the true causes. Advanced medical treatments for radiation exposure were developed in secret, with knowledge carefully compartmentalized to prevent the truth from emerging. Industrial records showed the rapid development of decontamination technologies disguised as improvements in sanitation and public health. The great sewer systems of London and Paris were actually designed as radiation monitoring networks, while the push for cleaner urban environments was motivated by the need to reduce contamination rather than general hygiene concerns. The conspiracy required the cooperation of journalists, scientists, politicians, and even foreign governments. International treaties were signed not just to prevent future nuclear conflicts, but to maintain the collective amnesia about what had already occurred. The Congress of Vienna was followed by secret protocols establishing the framework for historical revision on an unprecedented scale. Artists and writers became unwitting participants in the cover-up, commissioned to create works that would implant false memories in the collective consciousness. The Romantic movement's emphasis on nature and pastoral beauty served to distract from industrial devastation, while Gothic literature channeled genuine trauma into supernatural metaphors that obscured their nuclear origins. Chen's research revealed that knowledge of the true history was preserved by a secret society of scholars and scientists who believed future generations deserved to know the truth. These individuals encoded the real events in their published works, creating a hidden narrative that ran parallel to the official history. Their code was complex enough to escape detection by the censors, but simple enough that determined researchers might eventually decode it. The implications of Chen's discoveries extended far beyond historical curiosity. The techniques used to suppress the nuclear war had been refined and employed in subsequent cover-ups, creating a template for large-scale information management that influenced how governments handled inconvenient truths throughout the modern era. Medical records from the period showed patterns of illness consistent with radiation exposure, but these have been attributed to industrial pollution and poor sanitation. The rise of cancer rates in certain regions corresponded directly with the locations of alleged nuclear strikes, suggesting that the health impacts persisted long after the immediate destruction. Environmental evidence supported the literary clues. Soil samples from areas mentioned in the coded text showed trace radioactive elements inconsistent with natural background radiation. Tree ring data from the 1840s revealed growth patterns disrupted by radiation exposure, while geological surveys identified crater-like formations that had been explained as natural sinkholes or mining operations. The financial records of major banking houses revealed massive expenditures on what were euphemistically termed reconstruction projects in the affected regions. The Rothschild family's correspondence contained references to cleaning the poisoned earth and making the dead lands live again, suggesting their involvement in the post-war decontamination efforts. Photography, still a new technology in the 1840s, provided crucial evidence. Early daguerreotypes from the period showed architectural damage and human suffering that contradicted official accounts of peace and prosperity. These images have been systematically collected and hidden, but Chen found several that had escaped destruction in private collections. The role of women in preserving the truth proved crucial to Chen's investigation. Female writers and diarists, often overlooked by the male-dominated censorship apparatus, had recorded observations and experiences that provided vital pieces of the puzzle. Their domestic perspectives revealed details about evacuation procedures, food rationing, and family separations that official accounts had omitted. International correspondence between scholars revealed attempts to coordinate research across national boundaries. Scientists in different countries had noticed similar anomalies in their local records and had begun sharing information through coded academic papers and private letters. This informal network of truth seekers had preserved crucial evidence despite official suppression efforts. The psychological impact of the cover-up extended beyond mere historical revision. Entire populations had been subjected to what would later be recognized as mass gaslighting, with their lived experiences contradicted by official narratives. The collective trauma of nuclear war had been redirected into cultural movements and artistic expressions that seemed unconnected to their true origins. Chen's final discovery came in the form of a complete set of documents hidden in a sealed chamber beneath an Oxford college. These papers, left by a Victorian scientist who had participated in the nuclear program, contained detailed technical specifications, deployment records, and casualty reports from the secret war. The scientist's final note read, "I leave this record for future generations, in the hope that they will learn from our terrible mistakes and never again unleash such destructive forces upon the world." The existence of 19th-century nuclear weapons explained numerous historical anomalies that had puzzled scholars for generations. The rapid industrial development of the period, previously attributed to innovation and entrepreneurship, had actually been driven by the urgent need to rebuild destroyed infrastructure and develop countermeasures against radioactive contamination. The great literary works of the Victorian era took on new significance when viewed as repositories of suppressed truth. Every major author of the period had participated, consciously or unconsciously, in preserving the memory of humanity's first nuclear war. Their coded messages, hidden in plain sight within celebrated classics, represented one of history's most successful long-term preservation efforts. As Chun prepared to publish her findings, she realized that she was about to reveal not just a hidden chapter of 19th century history, but also a continuing conspiracy that had shaped the modern world. The techniques developed to suppress knowledge of the Victorian nuclear war had been refined and employed throughout the 20th century, creating a shadow system of information control that influenced global politics to the present day. The secret code of the classics had finally been broken, revealing that the greatest writers of the 19th century had been not merely observers of their times, but guardians of humanity's most dangerous secret. Their literary legacy was more than entertainment or artistic achievement. It was a time capsule containing evidence of our species' capacity for both destruction and redemption, waiting patiently for someone to decode its hidden message and learn from the mistakes of the past. 08:48 The weight of Chen's discovery pressed upon her as she sat surrounded by centuries-old documents in her cramped Oxford office. The implications extended far beyond academic curiosity into the realm of contemporary geopolitics. If the Victorian nuclear war had been successfully erased from history once, what other catastrophic events might have been similarly concealed? Her investigation into modern parallels began with an examination of 20th century literature for similar coded patterns. The works of H.G. Wells contain suspicious technical accuracy in their descriptions of atomic warfare, decades before the Manhattan Project. Wells' The World Set Free, published in 1914, described uranium-based weapons with a precision that suggested access to classified information rather than mere speculation. The trail led Chun to discover that Wells had been in correspondence with several descendants of the Victorian memory committees. His science fiction served a dual purpose, entertaining the masses while preserving technical knowledge of nuclear weapons for those who knew how to read between the lines. The time machine itself could be interpreted as a metaphor for the temporal displacement created by historical revision. Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness revealed new layers of meaning when Chun applied her decoding techniques. The journey into the African interior paralleled the psychological journey into suppressed memories of nuclear horror. Kurtz's final words, the horror took on literal significance when viewed as a reference to atomic warfare rather than colonial brutality. Chen's research into government archives revealed that the memory committees had not disbanded after the Victorian era, but had evolved into permanent institutions. The British Ministry of Information, established during World War I, contained personnel files showing direct lineage from the 19th century censorship apparatus. Similar organizations in France, Germany, and Russia showed comparable continuity. The Manhattan Project itself bore suspicious resemblances to the Victorian nuclear program. Key personnel files revealed that several leading scientists had grandparents or great-grandparents who had worked on the original 19th century weapons. Robert Oppenheimer's personal library contained first-edition copies of every major Victorian work that Chun had identified as containing nuclear codes, with extensive marginalia in multiple hands spanning several generations. Einstein's famous letter to Roosevelt urging American nuclear development contained phrases that appeared nowhere else in the physicist's correspondence, but matched terminology found in Tolstoy's hidden manuscripts. The letter's true authorship became questionable when Chun discovered that Einstein had visited the same Oxford College where she had found the sealed chamber of Victorian nuclear documents. The atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki served multiple purposes beyond ending World War II. They provided cover for rewriting the history of nuclear weapons, establishing the official narrative that atomic power had been discovered in the 1940s rather than a century earlier. The shocked global reaction to these first nuclear weapons helped cement the false timeline in public consciousness. Chun found evidence that the victims of Hiroshima and Nagasaki had been selected partially based on their lack of access to the suppressed Victorian records. Populations that might have recognized the true nature of atomic warfare had been systematically relocated away from target cities in the months preceding the attacks. The official surprise and horror expressed by world leaders was largely performative, designed to maintain the illusion of nuclear novelty. The Cold War nuclear arms race took on sinister new dimensions when viewed through Chen's discoveries. Both American and Soviet programs were building upon Victorian-era research that had never been truly abandoned. The apparent rapid development of thermonuclear weapons suggested access to theoretical work that predated official nuclear physics by generations. Underground nuclear testing during the Cold War served to contaminate geological evidence of earlier atomic detonations. Strategic test sites were selected to obscure radioactive signatures from Victorian-era weapons, creating false environmental data that supported the official timeline. The comprehensive test ban treaties were motivated less by environmental concerns than by the need to preserve the cover-up. Chen's investigation into contemporary events revealed that the pattern of historical suppression continued into the modern era. The Chernobyl disaster bore suspicious similarities to Victorian accounts of nuclear accidents, suggesting that reactor technology was far older than publicly acknowledged. The rapid international response and information control demonstrated institutional knowledge of nuclear crisis management that exceeded official experience. The collapse of the Soviet Union had created unexpected opportunities for historical revision. KGB archives contained references to Project Amnesia, a cooperative effort between Soviet and Western intelligence agencies to maintain the suppression of Victorian nuclear history. The end of the Cold War required new strategies for preserving the centuries-old conspiracy. Modern environmental movements served dual purposes in maintaining the cover-up. Legitimate concerns about nuclear weapons testing and reactor safety were channeled into activism that inadvertently protected the conspiracy by focusing attention on contemporary rather than historical nuclear contamination. Environmental scientists studying radiation patterns were steered away from anomalies that might reveal Victorian atomic warfare. The rise of the Internet posed unprecedented challenges to historical suppression efforts. Chen discovered evidence of sophisticated programs designed to flood online searches with false information about 19th century history while suppressing digitization of potentially revealing documents. Academic databases were carefully curated to exclude materials that might support alternative historical narratives. Digital forensics revealed that numerous historical documents had been altered before scanning, with nuclear-related content systematically removed or modified. The process was so sophisticated that only the most careful analysis could detect the forgeries. Library digitization projects worldwide were coordinated to ensure consistent historical narratives across cultural boundaries. Social media platforms employed algorithms specifically designed to suppress discussion of alternative Victorian history. Chen's own research had been shadow banned multiple times, with her academic papers receiving mysteriously low visibility despite significant scholarly interest. The technology companies responsible claimed the suppression was accidental, but the patterns were too consistent to be coincidental. Contemporary literature continued the tradition of coded historical preservation. Science fiction authors like Kim Stanley Robinson and Neil Stephenson embedded references to Victorian nuclear technology in their works, maintaining the chain of literary evidence for future researchers. Their technical accuracy in describing atomic processes suggested access to the same suppressed sources that had informed their Victorian predecessors. The pharmaceutical industry showed suspicious knowledge of radiation medicine that exceeded official research timelines. Treatments for radiation sickness had been developed and patented decades before their supposed discovery, suggesting continuous development from Victorian-era medical research. Cancer therapies demonstrated understanding of cellular damage patterns that matched descriptions in 19th century medical journals. Military technology revealed similar anachronisms. Electromagnetic pulse weapons and radiation detection systems showed design principles that predated their official invention by generations. Defense contractors employed techniques for nuclear material handling that suggested institutional knowledge, far exceeding their documented experience. Chen's investigation into modern nuclear facilities revealed architectural elements borrowed from Victorian designs. Safety protocols and containment strategies incorporated lessons learned from 19th century accidents that had never officially occurred. The International Nuclear Regulatory Framework was built upon standards developed during the covered-up Victorian nuclear program. Religious institutions continued their historical role in maintaining the conspiracy. Vatican archives contained modern documents referring to the continuing sacred trust to preserve humanity from the terrible knowledge of past sins. Similar language appeared in Buddhist monasteries in Tibet and Islamic institutions in the Middle East, suggesting a global interfaith commitment to historical suppression. Educational systems worldwide employed standardized curricula that systematically excluded any possibility of discovering Victorian nuclear technology. History textbooks were carefully crafted to make the official timeline seem inevitable and natural. Alternative theories were dismissed as conspiracy thinking, creating intellectual barriers to serious investigation. The space program served unexpected purposes in maintaining historical deception. Satellite monitoring systems were positioned to detect and suppress unauthorized archaeological excavations that might uncover Victorian nuclear sites. Mars exploration missions provided cover for developing technologies needed to clean up centuries-old radioactive contamination on Earth. Medical records from the Victorian era had been systematically altered to support false narratives about disease patterns. What had originally been documented as radiation sickness was rewritten as cholera, tuberculosis, or industrial poisoning. The global rise in cancer rates could be traced not to modern environmental factors, but to lingering contamination from 19th century nuclear weapons. Genetic studies revealed population bottlenecks in certain regions during the 1840s that were inconsistent with official demographic records. These genetic signatures indicated massive population displacement and death rates that supported Chen's theory of nuclear warfare. The data had been available for years, but have been explained away by references to conventional diseases and economic hardship. Archaeological evidence emerged from the most unexpected sources. Medieval cathedrals showed radiation damage that had been attributed to weathering, while Renaissance artwork displayed color changes consistent with gamma radiation exposure. These artifacts have been hiding in plain sight for centuries, their true significance obscured by official explanations. The development of nuclear power plants followed suspicious patterns that suggested prior experience with atomic technology. Early reactor designs incorporated safety features that addressed specific problems not yet encountered in official nuclear history. Construction techniques showed mastery of radiation containment that exceeded contemporary engineering knowledge. Financial markets revealed investment patterns that suggested insider knowledge of nuclear technology stocks decades before public awareness of atomic power. Banking families that had funded the Victorian nuclear program continued to hold strategic positions in modern nuclear industries. Their investment strategies demonstrated understanding of nuclear economics that predated official market development. Chen realized that her discovery was not just about revealing historical truth, but about understanding the mechanisms of large-scale social control. The Victorian nuclear cover-up had served as a template for managing public knowledge about dangerous technologies. The same techniques were being employed to control information about contemporary developments in artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, and climate manipulation. The conspiracy had evolved from a specific effort to suppress knowledge of one war into a comprehensive system for managing technological development. Society was being carefully guided along predetermined paths, with dangerous knowledge revealed only when authorities deemed humanity ready to handle it responsibly. The Victorian nuclear war had taught the ruling classes that unlimited access to powerful technologies could lead to civilization's destruction. As Chen prepared her final report, she understood that she was challenging not just historical orthodoxy, but the fundamental structure of information control that had shaped the modern world. The secret code of the classics had revealed more than literary cleverness or scholarly puzzle solving. It had uncovered the hidden architecture of power that determined what humanity was allowed to know about its own capabilities and past mistakes. The truth about Victorian nuclear warfare was simultaneously an ending and a beginning, the conclusion of a centuries-long cover-up, and the start of a new understanding about how technological development was managed by those who saw themselves as guardians of dangerous knowledge. The real question was not whether the conspiracy existed, but whether its continuation served humanity's best interests or merely the power of those who had appointed themselves as its secret protectors.